Because this is actually relatively new. It's from the 21st of March 2025, so well, but it is pretty damn new. And it's the Consumer Protection Corporation Network's key principles on in-game virtual currencies. God damn it, do I hate it when they are that long-winded in their text. But yeah, this is actually something really, really interesting because it actually is something that the EU is actually getting right for once in a modern field like games, which is pretty much as rare as, I don't know, there's not a good example for that. It's fucking rare. You think finding, you know, some four-leaved clover is hard? Fuck that shit. Try getting something like this once in a while. Far harder, far more difficult. I should know. Because Germany has been part of the EU for a very, very long time, and we have gone through a lot of shit, let's just say. Well, I mean, yes, let's first talk a little bit about the specifics of what we're dealing with here, you know. Namely, virtual currencies. Virtual currencies are nothing new, honestly. It's not something that just gacha games use, mind you. It's something that you've seen in more proper games as well. I mean, fuck, even WoW, once at a time, you know, the largest one out there, with, what was the highest account? I think 12 million subscribers at one point? Something like that. It was really amazing. Introduced a WoW token, with that a form of virtual currency that directly, or not so directly, relates to money, depending on who you ask. But hey, that of course, and many others. There are so many games in in-game shops where you can buy whatever the fuck they call them. Call it crystals, or permits, or energy, or whatever the fuck else you want to call it. I don't even care. As far as I'm concerned, they could call it dicks and tits and would still boil down to the same. It's basically a currency that has no actual value. Even more so because it's a digital currency, which means it absolutely has no value. Why would you have that in your game? Because you can make absolutely good amounts of money off that. And of course, gacha games are indeed the most prevalent in this particular market because they're built for that. However, the amount of games where you can buy skins for amazing amounts of money is ludicrous these days, and the practice has been so wide and far spread, it's not even fucking funny. Which wouldn't even be a problem if not a lot of the tactics they use to sell these bloody fake currencies are more or less specifically aimed to target children, which is already pretty damn soulish. That isn't saying that adults are immune to many of the tactics that they like to use, mind you. But also, of course, because they make it damn well so that you will ever and always forever have to spend more than what you actually need, technically speaking. If you want a skin, well, guess what? You're probably not gonna get the exact amount of coins that you would need to get said skin out of the shop. You will probably have to buy more. Why is that a thing? Well, obviously, because that makes more money. It also means that for the next purchase, you already have a few coins left over, which is going to, you know, reduce the amount of resistance you might feel to invest more money, because, well, you already have a little bit, right? So now you have to spend less, right? Stuff like that. Then there's, of course, the usual tactics of, you know, adding bonus value, where it's like if you buy more coins, we'll just call them coins for ease sake. You could also call them dicks if you want to, but that's gonna get confusing rather quickly, isn't it? As for coins, yes, coins is a good word. Also, yeah. To be fair, you know, back then, 12 million fucking, I'm gonna say, gems. Actually, yeah, go, let's go for gems. But yeah, gems. As I said, usually you cannot get the exact amount you want. And that is, of course, for full-on purpose. To reiterate this point, obviously, because that way you spend more. Then there's the idea that buying more coins would give you value in the form of bonus coins, which is a ridiculous concept because in order to apply a bonus, you would need to have a baseline value. The currency has no value. It is quite literally a digital currency that has no value whatsoever attached to it. Meaning, of course, there cannot be any bonus, because a bonus would need an extra to be applied on a baseline. You cannot have that because you do not actually have a baseline. It's ridiculous. It is just there to catch your eye. That is all it is. Some go even as far as to go down the good old-fashioned, you know, via sale nonsense, where it's like, oh, now you need to buy this now. It's only going to be in the store for, like, you know, 48 hours, and then it's going to be gone forever. Which of course is ridiculous considering the simple fact that, as I said, this is all a digital thing in-game. It's not like they're losing the data. It's not like they're deleting the data after, for example, a certain skin or character or weapon or whatever the fuck you're trying to get is done. It's still there. And depending on which game you play, there's actually, you know, a good chance it's gonna get a rerun once in a while. Happens. Now, to be fair, and I want to make this very clear, not every gacha game even out there is that fucking predatory about it. Do most gacha games have premium currency? Of course, because most of these are free to play and that is kinda how they finance themselves. Which, as far as I'm concerned, okay. So long as they, you know, keep away from the more annoying practices and do precisely what the EU would like them to do, namely giving you a nice little shortcut that actually gives you the real life value, the real currency used in your country value next to each and every purchase. Which means not just telling me that 2000 gems cost like $5, no. You need to go to the skin, and next to the skin that costs like 5,800 gems, you need to tell me how much that is, so that I can, with one singular look at what I potentially want to have, see the actual price point. Why is that important? Well, mostly because, for example, children kinda lack the ability to think that far outside of what is presented to them. An adult can, not all can, some fall for this as well, and do not actually realize how much spending is actually involved in getting what they want. Which is ridiculous, especially considering that, just imagine this in real life, you know, imagining a shop going like, okay, you can only pay here with, I don't know, Aldi coins, let's say. Okay, so now I need to buy Aldi coins, and then every price in the shop is just depicted in Aldi coins instead of, oh, I don't know, fucking euros. Yeah, that wouldn't fly, would it now? Absolutely not. In fact, I'm pretty sure that is a very highly illegal move to make. Especially in Germany, considering how much information you actually have to present on a price tag. You have to present the actual price, you have to present the price for the next bigger unit. So for example, if you're buying something that is 500 grams, you need to paint me down a picture what costs, you know, 1 kilogram of that, so I can compare, for example, 2 packs of sugar, because why not? You know, stuff like this. You have to make sure that all of the information that could be necessary for me to make a informed buying decision needs to be there. Now in the past, and I've said this often, Germany and the EU kind of make the mistake that we have a tendency to take our laws that we apply to real life and just one for one put them in the internet, which is a horrible idea, most of the time. In this one case, this could actually work. For once. As you can see, oh, well, you can't see because my fucking face is in the way, but I only have 2 pages here. One is the official little paper we have here, that we're gonna read parts of. Basically just the highlights, because let's be honest here, it's a few pages, let's just say. I mean, it's only 8, but you know, I can't be asked to read all. I found also a nice little thing on Reddit talking about it, and since, well, that kinda worked pretty well just for, I don't even know what for, but it worked pretty well the last time we looked at that, so we're gonna do that again. With that said, the key principles apply to in-game virtual currencies understood as digital representation of a value. Yes, a very obscured and obfuscated value. That are purchased for real-world monetary value and then used by consumers to pay a price in exchange for the supply of in-game digital service or content within a video game. Yes, that is a very, very long-winded way of saying premium currency, but yes, I don't think I necessarily need to explain much more about what premium currency is. If you have never encountered it, play a gacha game for once. Come on, you can't hate waifus that much that you can't be asked to, you know, download a few gigabytes, launch it, and take a look at the in-game store. You'll get the idea real quickly, believe me. The CPC network considers in-game virtual currency as digital representation of real-world monetary value, and they serve no purpose other than, or for, which other functions are secondary to providing for a method of payment, the purchase of digital content or services in a video game, or where applicable for the purchase or another in-game virtual currency. Yes, that's true, because some games actually have multiple virtual currencies. Where you not just have gems, as I said, you know, if your original currency is dicks, then you can buy, 2,000 dicks, and you can then turn 2,000 dicks and 500 titties to get what you want. because obfuscating what you're actually spending is far more important than you think. It's amazing. In such cases, transactions where consumers pay a price for digital content or services by exchanging in-game virtual currencies for game digital content or services are subject to European consumer protection laws. They should have been all the time, but they weren't for some reason. As I said, in Europe in general, especially if you look into Germany, we have a tendency to take one for one anything and everything we have written into law and apply to the internet. As I said, in many cases this is a horrible idea. But in this case it would actually be for the consumer, for you, for your benefit. Just like purchases with real world currencies. Yes, because whenever you spend money, you as a customer have a right to be informed. Any transaction you do, buying a fucking, something like this, you buy a fucking banana. Okay. That's a contract. If you boil it down, that's a fucking contract you're doing there. Which means that can only be legal if both parties actually know what they're getting out of it and are informed, can make informed decisions. Otherwise it's not legal. It's obviously. So non-exhaustive list of practices that consumers may encounter when playing video games. Yes, it does mean that, we have seen some shit, but there could be more shit, and we are of course, going to apply this to other shit as well when we feel the need. Post-purchasing is subsequent spending in exchange for the supply of digital content and digital services is subject to the mandatory rules of European consumer protection legislation, which is pretty damn simple in most places, where you actually have to at all times display the exact amount with and without taxation added to it, so the customer can make an informed decision for whatever price you are offering them. Obviously. To put this lightly, you will end up with something like this. This is basically the idea. An in-game virtual currency or in-game digital content or services offered for sale, their price in real-world money should be clearly and prominently displayed. Yes. Let me make it clear. Not just when I'm buying the currency. I want this exact same thing happening when I'm looking at the store, when I see a skin, a weapon, a new character. I want to see right next to them what that is going to cost me. If they're just writing 5,800 coins, dicks, tits, whatever, I don't fucking care. I want to see what that is in actual motherfucking money. And my money. I don't care what that costs me in USD. I don't care what that costs me in ruble. In anything. I want to know what that costs in euro. Easily. Simple. All I'm asking for. It could be so fucking simple. When in-game virtual currency is offered in exchange for another in-game virtual currency, which the user can buy with real-world money, the price should be indicated also in real-world money. Now if we take this, because this kinda is what I'm trying to get at, this whole idea here, because technically speaking a skin would be another in-game currency, so as long as they apply it broadly enough, this actually works for me, and I'm happy with that. So all I wanted. In-game digital content or services offered in exchange for in-game virtual currency that can be bought in the price should be indicated. That is. Now they're hammering at home, so at this point, all should be good. Because as long as you do this, things will become far less obscure and will become far harder to obscure, basically. Of course, this is not the only thing they're doing. And we actually do have a nice little thing that they can actually base this on. Great, isn't it? Let's look at practices to avoid. Offering for purchase, mixing different in-game virtual currencies in one video game for purchasing in-game digital content or services. Meaning that yes, forcing somebody to basically, you want to buy a skin, the skin costs 500 titties, and well, the only currency you can buy is dicks. So you have to buy 2,000 dicks, and you have then go through another service to change these into titties in order to buy the skin. Very bad idea, because it makes it really fucking hard to tell, isn't it? Requiring several exchanges of in-game virtual currencies before making in-game purchases. Now the fact that this is just practices to avoid and not outright stated as illegal is a bit annoying, because it should be, because under normal circumstances, as I said, in any real life circumstance, that much obfuscation would be seen as quite problematic. But about see, you can give me an option, okay? Now just give me an option to click on the money and choose my own currency I want to see this displayed in. How about that? You can add in whatever you want. Thaler, Dukaten, Denari. I don't care. Would be nice. Practices for consumers to purchase unwanted in-game virtual currency should be avoided. Traders should not engage in practices distorting the economic behavior of consumers by designing video games in ways that force the consumer to spend more real-world money on in-game currency than they need to buy the selected in-game content or services. Meaning, very simple, the fact that I am forced to buy 2,000 gems when I only need 1,200 is bullshit. What you should do is let me choose precisely how much gems I want to buy. It's simple, isn't it? It would be really simple, isn't it? Because you see, this is kind of how it looks normally, right? You get all of this, but why not just let me, why not just let me fucking choose? Just give me a nice little field here, here in the middle, where it's like type in number and then you type in like, oh, I want this sort of destiny, so I type in 750. The game then tells me, okay, 750 gems cost you, I already had 37, so I guess a little bit less. But let's say I had 0, then, 750, then the game tells me, okay, 750, that costs that, please click confirm, then you go to whatever fucking payment servers they use, you pay them, you get your fucking coins, you buy your sword. Done. Simple as. Wouldn't that be nice? Action points to be taken. Accompany any offer to purchase in-game digital content or service in exchange for real-world money or virtual currency with the necessary pre-contextual information. It's not limited to information on the main characteristics of the in-game digital content or services or virtual currency. Yeah, that's gonna be difficult, isn't it? The identity and contact details of the trader. That is in some cases also going to be difficult. The price in real-world monetary value. That is absolutely doable. Easily doable, mind you. It wouldn't even take much. The existence and conditions of the consumer's right of withdrawal. That is something we actually don't have. Now this is a bit of a... How do I put this? This is a bit of a... I'm a bit split on this one, technically speaking. Should you have a right to refund in-game currency or in-game things? Yes, according to normal customer rights, you absolutely should have a right to refund. But then again, this could very easily be misused, couldn't it be? Let's say that you, classical gacha games, you're rolling for something, with very, very low probability. Okay, you buy 10 pulls. You do your 10 pulls, you don't get what you want. You refunds. You do it again. I mean, to be fair, this is a very crude example and probably wouldn't work like this because companies are not that stupid. But generally speaking, I'm not too convinced that you could give in a refund policy thing that would actually work reasonably well with virtual currency. And if you give it then on the other hand, I would also still have to recognize, or well, would probably recognize actually the company's right to, well, ban you from playing the game. Because, otherwise that will end up being the massive loss for them in the long run, because people will absolutely fucking use and abuse stuff like this. I've seen people do that in real life, mind you. The right to refund things. That's granted. So if you tell me they wouldn't do this online, of course they would. They would find ways to use and abuse that absolutely quickly. So yeah, at this point I do believe the companies would have then the right to just go like, well, okay, if you want the refund, then we're just going to ban your account. It might not necessarily be the ideal solution, but it's at least a practical solution, I would say. Not too sure if this would actually work out well for both sides, but you can't just, give just everything to one side, because, well, then no business transaction would ever happen, because nobody would want to be a trader that is bound by too many laws, and nobody wants to be a customer with no laws. Although, to be fair, people have accepted having no laws for a long time at this point. Well, the legal guarantee of conformity for digital content and services. A legal guarantee. That's also going to be a rather difficult thing to provide in... Yeah, let's just say, depending on where you are, that's kind of problematic. I can think, at least off the top of my head, of 3 different things that I've seen in gacha games in my time that, at least according to German law, would be difficult to get around. So that might be a bit difficult, honestly. Payment and delivery methods. I mean, to be fair, delivery methods in this case are relatively obvious. You click the button, you pay them the money, and usually within a few seconds you get a pling and you get your stuff. The payment methods are already relatively clearly and diversely put out because, well, they kind of want to make sure that you have all the options at your hand to give them your hard-earned money. Customers' right of withdrawal should be respected. See, this is one I'm really not too comfortable with, but let's at least take a look in here, shall we? Offering to purchase either in-game virtual currency, digital content or services, the trader should comply with European consumer protection legislation and inform customers of the steps for exercising their right of withdrawal and, where applicable, allow them to exercise that right within 14 days of the purchase. Which, in the case of digital content, should be no problem whatsoever when you think about it. At least in theory. Of course, the companies that actually make such games, that use such practices, will argue no, that it is a real hard job to do and that we cannot just implement that. It's far too much work. Yeah, I doubt that. I really do. For digital content to be exempt from the right of withdrawal, the consumer must give the express consent to begin using the content or service immediately, before the 14-day period expires, and acknowledge that the right of withdrawal will be lost, meaning you'll get another fucking annoying pop-up that goes like, yes, you can't actually, you know, refund this. Is this okay with you? I look forward to clicking another pop-up away. It's just like with cookies. It's like this site uses cookies. Cool. Could we not? Well. The consent and acknowledgement can be requested and provided together in a single click, but separate from the click to purchase the digital content. Yes, because some people... which game was that again? Was that... I think it was actually one of the Diablos, wasn't it? Was it Diablo 4, where they basically had the Buy the Battle Pass button, very unfortunately, or very fortunately, depending on which side of the argument you're on, positioned, and no confirmation window whatsoever. Everything else in this game has a fucking confirmation window. Not the Battle Pass though. That's what you click once and got it. Sneaky. Very sneaky. Pretty much what I expect from Blizzard nowadays. Oh, excuse me, Activision Blizzard to be precise. I don't actually wanna, you know, hurt poor Blizzard of old, because Blizzard of old was actually pretty damn awesome. Activision Blizzard, on the other hand, let's not, shall we? I will get sad otherwise. In addition, a trader must provide consumers confirmation of the respective contract, including information of the consumer's express content and acknowledgement. Yeah, this is a lot of paperwork. Or a lot of notifications you're suddenly gonna get. Exempting the purchase of in-game virtual currency, which is not digital content, from the right of withdrawal. Denying consumers the right to withdraw from a contract for the purchase of in-game virtual currency within 14 days of any in-game virtual currency that remains unused. Strategy. Blizzard of old was the most beloved child of all for quite a while. Warcraft 1, 2, 3, Frozen Throne, Diablo 1, 2, plus expansion, World of Warcraft in its early stage. Yes, Blizzard could do no wrong. I believe you me. People will agree with that. Okay, I don't think there were always some doomers. I remember during Burning Crusade or something, I even had people on the forums shouting like, this is the end of, the game sucks now. It's like, yeah. That game had like 12 million fucking subscribers. Paying subscribers, mind you. It's not the same as, you know, just fucking downloading the game and playing it. Fucking paying subscribers. 13 euros a month for, I think, 15 USD or something. It was quite a spending at the time. Yes, strategy. Later on, their work environment was indeed came under a lot of fire. But Blizzard of old was a golden boy, as far as anyone was concerned. Denying consumers the right to withdraw from contracts for the purchase of in-game digital content or services, regardless of whether the player pays with real-world money, in-game virtual currencies, or provides personal data to the trader. I can see many problems with that as well, but okay. Now, contractual terms should be fair and written in plain and clear language. Coming from the people that have never once in their life written in just plain and simple language, that's a bold statement to make. But well, it is indeed true, and it is actually something that is written into most European legislations, that indeed any sort of contract and its terms need to be written out in a easy to understand, hard to misunderstand or misinterpret fashion that makes the intent obvious, as well as any terms applicable to the contract. Yes, technically speaking, that's true. Practically speaking, if you have ever looked at an actual buy contract for something like a fridge, for example, it's not written simple and plain. Not really. At least not in Germany, I can tell you that much. It has a lot of nice little fine print to it, let's just say. Let's see how they think about this. The terms and conditions of video game and any contractual terms related to the purchase of in-game currency, blah 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 blah, should be written in plain and clear language. Okay, fair enough, but it won't ever happen. Limit consumers' statutory right when making purchases of foreign currencies, as these contractual terms are, in most cases, not individually negotiated with customers. They are, of course, not. They should not be written in such a way as to cause a significant imbalance in the parties' rights and obligations under the contract. Yes, ideally that would be the case. Terms to avoid. Terms that give the trader the unilateral right to seize, modify, or withdraw the purchased digital content or services or the purchased in-game virtual currencies at any moment in an unfair manner. That is actually a good point because, well, technically speaking, and this kind of boils back to the first, or the earlier point I made, if we give the company or if we leave the company the right to ban my account, then any money I spend on my account is kind of lost. Now, depending on how you look at this is unfair. Because now they have my money, but I don't get the goods I paid for. This is the sort of can of worms you really don't want to open, because this is actually really, really annoying, and this can lead to very, very long confrontations between lawmakers and, well, game makers in this case. Terms which deny or limit customers their legal rights or their ability to exercise those rights, including when making purchases using in-game virtual currency. Basically, ideally, you should never have, a nice little button that you need to click that you're basically signing away your rights. Because it's mean. However, that is basically the only way you can get this to work, so get used to more clicking, I suppose. Terms giving unilateral rights to traders to remove content or feature in the video game at any moment, particularly if the content or feature is purchasable for customers, and consumers could expect it to remain at the time of purchase. Oh my! All of those limited actions where it's like, look, we have a new character, but he's only going to be around for like a week. Well, that already would be complicated. But let's say that you later on remove a mechanic or something. How are you going to apply this then? Let's say that you have a character with a specific mechanic, and the mechanic is broken as fuck to the point they can't fix it, so they remove it. Okay, so now you've taken value out of my buy. Do I get my money back now? Part of my money? How much money? You could be really, really mean here. Terms granting traders a right to unilaterally modify the value of in-game virtual currencies. Which is a given because the ones creating the currency in the first place are the companies. So, as I said, so long as you don't have a baseline on which you can grade the value of anything currency-wise, the fuck are you going to apply that? Pretty damn stupid. Terms granting traders the ability to ban, suspend, or remove consumers' access to their accounts or purchase digital content or services without the ability to contest the reason for this action. My. Wouldn't that be interesting? Imagine if they couldn't just ban you any longer, because right now, and that is the simple case, technically speaking, you play a game, you have an account, they can ban you for whatever reason they want. They don't even need to justify it. And even if you have spent like, I don't know, a few $1,000 on your account, doesn't really matter. They can just go like, gone. Easy enough. Now, to be fair, that is a kinda necessary thing, because A, you kinda need the ability to ban people for, well, playing outside the rules, obviously. But you also kinda need this as a tool in order to make sure that, people don't abuse the systems that be put in place for their protection. So it's, Of course, now we have to talk about the vulnerable customers, which is children. Status to be particularly cautious when consumers are vulnerable to certain commercial practices. The trader can be reasonably expected to foresee this. Yes, if you're, talking quite literally to somebody who's retarded, there's a reason why we are, at least as far as Germany is concerned, not allowing them to sign any legal contracts. Why? Because they are retarded. You don't need to think about this any deeper than this now, do you? Same with children. Children are also not allowed to bind themselves to contracts legally, because obviously not, are children. Which is kinda, I don't think we need to talk about it, but it's nice of them to, Make sure it's there. Consumers can be vulnerable to the account of, for example, their age, mental or physical infirmity, and credulity, but this is not an exhaustive list. Of course it isn't. Which means basically, you know, you can buy something for a few $1,000 and then claim you're autistic and suddenly, well, you're out of your contract again. Bit mean, to be fair, but it works, or it would work, in theory at least. When it comes to video games, the vulnerability of consumers must be accessed within the context of the specific video game. A certain group of consumers are always considered vulnerable, such as children, obviously. But other consumers may be considered vulnerable only in the context. For example, a consumer that's outside of a video game would generally not be considered a vulnerable consumer, maybe in the context of a video game. Includes practices that could exploit a specific vulnerability, for example, problematic spending behavior. Is anyone surprised that these companies would actually try to further problematic spending behaviors? Aren't casinos doing the exact same thing? Therefore, traders should adapt their practices according to the consumer's need to actually be reached by the practice, not only according to the intended target group. So even if you claim like my game is for like, you know, a mature audience only, that is not going to necessarily mean shit. In that sense, traders in the video game industry should be particularly cautious of their games being likely to appeal to children, even if they are not the target audience. Call of Duty. Played only so many rounds of it, but I'm pretty damn sure just going off the lobby, there were more fucking kids in there than adults. And I'm pretty sure that thing is still not rated for children, is it now? I want to see this applied to Call of Duty. Let's see, it technically disconnects the act of spending from real-world money, which is the whole point of it, indeed. In turn, leads to expenditure of real-world money. That is true. This is a commercial practice. There's legitimate and it's just the economic behavior of customers. Customer demographics of children. Yes, that is true. Basically, once again, they're pointing out that yes, games are designed very specifically to obfuscate very harshly how much you're actually spending, which, technically speaking, so long as you have access to your own bank account, you can see your spending, of course, at the end of the month, and, you know, go like, oh shit. Right now, you won't have any way to actually get back at any of that, but you might in the future. But children who are usually using, well, you know, for the most part, their parents' money, and are definitely not nearly as easily capable of checking on their finances regularly. Yeah, for them it's even more obfuscated. That, and of course their small little brains are not yet capable to thinking that far outside the box. Something that you expect of most adults, but then again not even they are all capable of doing so. And of course these companies take advantage of that. Given the widespread popularity of video games among children, not just children mind you, but fair enough, for the adult audience, part of their player base to be under the age of 18 years old. All places avoid commercial practices that are likely to distort children's economic behavior by exploiting, for example, their lack of experience, economic knowledge, or natural credulity. Fair enough. I understand a video game that includes consider the player. Yeah, they're not gonna do this because, I mean, technically speaking, no, they are doing this. Precisely that is what they're doing. They are considering the vulnerabilities of their players in order to, well, abuse them. So it's not like they don't even, you can't even claim they don't have any data on this. They do. They have. They have all the data. There's any commercial practices that encourage the purchase in including advertising marketing techniques. Consider these specific vulnerable players to ensure that they do not exploit these vulnerabilities. See, again, their marketing also knows what they are doing. By just look at the way they're presenting things, you know, as I said, you know, stuff like the assumed bonus for buying more, stuff like this, things that encourage people to take maybe, you know, on a higher value pack in order to get more for their money, stuff like that. Yes, of course, that is all meant to exploit vulnerabilities. What the fuck else? Designing the gameplay always ensure that the commercial element of in-game advertisements related to in-game virtual currencies, digital content, and services are sufficiently clear and distinguishable from the gameplay. Hasn't even, let me think, wasn't it, what was the last one? Assassin's Creed Shadows. Doesn't this single-player game even has an in-game shop these days? Which, in a single-player game, very much would feel like something that is absolutely intended to be part of the gameplay, so... I mean, if you can interpret this to make it go away, I'm not opposed to that. In fact, I'm actually quite in favor of that. Do not use commercial practices and rankings for children. Some companies wouldn't even exist without, quite literally, using children for money. Interesting. Ensure that functional parental controls with age-appropriate default settings are provided, such as by default disabling the possibility of spending real-world money in the video game. Yeah, gacha games won't do that, will they, though? Imagine a gacha game that comes with the cash shop locked by default. Also, platform-level parental controls offered by the platform on which the video game is available. Yeah, I don't think there are that many actually well-working parental controls on most platforms, are there? No. Actually, I think actually there's still a bit of a problem where most parents actually don't know nearly enough about platforms like, let's say, Steam to even understand how to do this. This is a bit out there. Okay, fair enough. Avoid basing the business model on practices exploiting vulnerable consumers willing to spend excessive amount of real-world money in a video game. Yeah, but then we're not gonna get that many gacha games any longer. Isn't that true, though? When you think about it, yes, a lot of these games are built specifically and have as their very core element the idea that, yes, we kinda thrive on, well, you know, getting money out of people that probably are stupid enough to fall for it. And mind you, the group stupid enough to fall for it is actually surprisingly large. So, as I said, it's not just children. There are also many adults who really, really suck at managing their own spending. I mean, I'm not even talking about the usual, you know, woman shopping spree. Where, you know, your girlfriend comes up to you and was like, yeah, I'm gonna go shopping with my friends. I'm gonna be back later on a nice Saturday. And you're just sitting there like, yeah, have fun. Good thing she didn't ask me to come with her, because that's boring as fuck. Comes later, a few hours later, you know, you look at her up and down and you go like, that's like fucking 8 bags. The fuck did you buy? She's like, here, nothing. You look at the 8 bags, they're fucking full. There's at least 2 pairs of shoes there, and you damn well know those weren't cheap, and you go like, darling, my darling, you remember that I told you, this month, really bad money-wise. We really don't have spending money. How much did you spend? Not much. And then I look at the fucking bank account and go like, why the fuck are we in the minus? No, that's not just what. That's already a nice example of, you know, very bad spending habits. And we haven't even touched upon people, you know, with a tendency to go fucking gambling or stuff like that. Or, you know, other things like this. But yeah, potentially this could of course mean a lot of trouble for a lot of game companies, technically speaking, which is why a lot of game companies have actually complained about this and went like, well, they, not directly, but, you know, indirectly, through the veil, kind of threatened that, well, if you do this, we're just going to pull out of the European market. Which is ridiculous, because the European market as a whole is worth a lot of money. By that I mean a lot of money that they are willing to actually spend on stupid shit. Like games, like digital content. I think we are not that far behind markets like America in that particular regard. Although I do think the Americans are actually even still the most likely group to spend their money on useless shit at the end of the day. It is useless, after all. However, just by size, you know, the European market isn't far behind. To completely cuck yourself out of that particular market is a horrible idea that is probably not ever going to be working. As well as, you know, people are talking about this as well, obviously. I've taken some parts, and yeah, there's some interesting questions here in regards of, you know, how this is implemented in European countries which are not in the EU, like, for example, the UK. Kind of interesting question where I don't think they are really thinking about it too much, because, well, if you're not part of the EU, you're not bound by this anyway, so hey, fuck you, I guess. Is basically it. Yeah, and that's a good point. Of course, adults are also not immune to the tactic. I wouldn't go so far as to loving the European Union, because the European Union, for the most part, is kind of shitty and just more bureaucracy on top of what you already have in the, you know, bureaucracy, so the idea of, a blind chick finding something once, it's like, yeah, sure, it might be blind, but once in a very, 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 very rare moment, it's right, it gets something. Like that clock that is broken, but still right twice a day. Yes, obviously, but that doesn't make it good, now does it? Yeah, about how... See, he's right here in this way where it's like, okay, yeah, this is the most obvious. Prices are listed in the right currency, right next to what you're buying. Okay, but as for the other methods, how would those be implied? How would you actually make sure that your game is not actually targeting vulnerable groups? And what could I do when I feel like you are actually doing precisely that? What if I feel that your marketing for your in-game shop is actually taking advantage of vulnerable groups? Can I just go then to the next best lawyer and go like, hey, take a look. Here, look at my game. The game is trying to extort me. I have to do something about this. What would be the punishment for that? Would be even more interesting. Oh yeah, Diablo Immortal was it, ne? I remember Diablo Immortal. I think that was the only time I had that much fucking booing as a fucking BlizzCon. I'm saying something, because BlizzCon, once, that was quite the major event, I'll have to say. Surprise mechanics. Didn't we already talk about loot crates at the time? Because, well, it is gambling in the end. Anything else here interesting? I don't really see anything, but I also do think we have talked more than enough about this, as I already started a bit later than I planned. I'm kind of burning to get back to playing games. But yeah, to give you a nice little final conclusion here, for once, and rarely does it happen, the EU is actually doing something good. Something that will actually help customers, vulnerable or otherwise, to not get fucked over by greedy companies. And if you tell me game companies aren't greedy, you haven't played enough gacha games yet.